Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for turning out tonight for the unveiling of the historic plaque to honor Julius Bar and the April 21st, 1966 sit-in, which took place here 56 years ago today. My name is Andrew Berman. I'm the Executive Director of Village Preservation. We are partnered today with the New York City LGBT Historic Sites Project. Ken Lusbader is also going to be speaking. We also have with us Helen Buford, the wonderful owner of Julius's Bar. Who's also going to be speaking with us. We have writer, director, actor, and activist John Cameron Mitchell, who has their own special relationship to Julius's Bar. And we've got a couple of surprise guests tonight. State Senator Brad Hoylman is here, who has something wonderful that he's going to be sharing with us. And I just want to quickly mention Lucy Commissar is here, who was the journalist who wrote the Village Voice article in 1966 about the sit-in. We're also joined by some wonderful historians like Jonathan Ned Katz and John D'Amelio. Thank you so much for being here and for everything that you've done. I know that there's many people in this crowd who have contributed to getting us to where we are today. Too many to name, but hopefully we can all enjoy this wonderful event tonight. So I also want to thank the Village Preservation staff, Juan, Leanne, Hugh, David, everybody for help putting this together and making it possible. So thank you so much. I'm going to just quickly say a few words about Village Preservation. If you don't know us, we are a neighborhood nonprofit. We've been around since 1980. Our job is to document, celebrate, and protect the special architectural and cultural history of Greenwich Village, the East Village, and NoHo. That includes small businesses like Julius's. That includes the special civil rights and social justice history connected to our neighborhoods. And that, of course, includes especially the LGBTQ history, which our neighborhoods are richer in than probably any other place on earth. I also want to mention, by the way, I'm sorry that I sort of skipped over this, we're very honored as well to be joined tonight by Randy Wicker, one of the original participants in the 1966 sit-in. So Randy, thank you so much for being here. So this is our 19th historic plaque that we've unveiled here in the neighborhood, honoring everybody from James Baldwin to Jane Jacobs, from Anais Nin to Alex Haley. It's an ongoing program intended to educate the public about this wonderful history. We want to make sure that when everybody passes by this building, they know the incredibly important things that took place here and that in so many important ways continue on with the presence of Julius's Bar here. A couple of brief words about why Julius's is so important. So first of all, the building that it's housed in was built almost 200 years ago, about 1825, 1826, and there has actually been an operating bar here since at least the 1860s, making it one of the oldest continuously operating bars anywhere in New York City. Since at least the 1950s, it has served a predominantly gay clientele, although doing so, as we will discuss tonight, was a very different endeavor in the 1950s and 1960s than it is today, making it arguably New York City's oldest gay bar. It is also, of course, a wonderful, community-engaged, civic-minded small business, and we're so thrilled that the bar is run by somebody who loves it so much, is so generous to the community, who cares about creating a real sense of community with this bar and continuing it on to this day and into the future. The sit-in is a uniquely important event. As I said, 56 years ago, 3 years before Stonewall, when a handful of brave people said, we've got to do something about the way our society treats gay people. That they are criminalized, that they are considered inherently disordered, which was the term that was used, that for them to openly gather together was considered a sign of criminality. And this was one very important chink in that wall to break that down to bring about the dramatic change that we've seen in the last 5.5 decades, where the place of LGBTQ people in our society, in our city, in our country has changed so dramatically, and we owe a great debt of gratitude to the people who were involved in that and helped make all of that change possible. So, I also just want to mention that remembering and honoring this history is an enormously important thing to do. Today, so many people know what Stonewall is and what it means. I can remember when I was growing up, never having heard that story, never having heard what that was. A lot of people worked very, very hard over the years to make sure that that history is honored and remembered. Julius's and the Sip-In is another great example of where and how we need to do that. The fact that there wasn't just one event where suddenly everything changed, but there was a lot of hard work that went before it and a lot of hard work that came after it. And that's part of what we are here to honor tonight. So I've said plenty. I'm gonna turn the microphone over to our next speaker, who, as I mentioned before, Ken Lusbader from the New York City LGBT Historic Sites Project, our partner with putting the plaque up here today. Ken.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for this wonderful crowd. Could everyone hear me who's gathered here? All right, who's gathered here today to commemorate Julius's as the oldest continually operating gay bar in New York City and as the site of the 1966 Sip-In. As Andrew said, I'm Ken Lusbader. I'm one of the co-directors of the NYC LGBT Historic Sites Project, joined today with our co-director Jay Shockley, project manager Amanda Davis, and regrettably co-director Andrew Dulcart, who wrote the nomination along with us, could not be here today. But I'd like to thank our partner, Village Preservation, John Cameron Mitchell, Helen Buford, the owner and wonderful steward of Julius's history, and for collaborating on this event. Our project is a cultural heritage initiative and educational resource documenting LGBT place-based history from the 17th century to the year 2000 that illustrates the community's influence and contributions to the culture of New York City and the nation. We are making an invisible history visible through our interactive map, National Register nominations, public programs, publications, school programs, advocacy, and expanding content. And today, to date, I should say, we've created a cultural heritage landscape of over 400 sites along New York City from all 5 boroughs that are used to educate the public about LGBTQ history. When we launched the project in 2015, there were only 3 sites of the more than 95,000 sites on the National Register specifically listed for LGBTQ associations on the register. And the National Register, everybody should know, is the federal listing of sites associated with American culture and history. So to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Sip-In in 2016, we nominated Julius's to the National Register. And today, a few 6 years later, we are putting the plaque up. But we wanted to make sure Julius survived the pandemic, so here we are today. And since that official nomination in 2016, we've nominated 10 additional sites to the National Register of Historic Places, making New York City the leader of queer federal sites recognized. So, let's step back in time to convey the importance of the Sip-In and the visibility of this plaque and what it means to be an LGBTQ marker. Visibility is what the Mattachine Society, one of the earliest gay rights groups in the country, was working to achieve in 1966, 3 years before the Stonewall Uprising. Now I can say I've shared the stage with John Cameron Mitchell.
I can't hear you.
Thank you. Just briefly, after Prohibition, the New York State Liquor Authority was established in 1934. It had the authority to revoke the liquor licenses of a bar that operated as a disorderly house, which included serving homosexual patrons. At the same time, the police department would surveil bars for homosexuals, entrap men for solicitation, and raid bars. By the 1960s, the Mattachine Society, which was established in 1951, and others in the community whose lives were ruined and disrupted, were seeing activist actions by the Black Civil Rights Movement and the anti-war movement, among other movements. The sit-in, based on the sit-in based on the sit-in counter sit-ins by the American South, successfully recorded discrimination in action when they announced that they were homosexuals and were refused service. This was captured by Village Voice photographer Fred McDowra in that famous sick-bin photo and publicized by the Village Voice, thankfully to our reporter here, the New York Post, and the New York Times. While there were earlier pickets for LGBTQ discrimination in New York City in 1964 and 1965, led by Randy Wicker, this was the first that actually captured anti-discrimination in time, in real time, and eventually helped pave the way for legitimate gay bars as one step along that long trajectory of liberation and LGBT rights. The courageous men of Mattachine who took part in that action, Dick Leitch, Craig Rodwell, John Timmons, and Randy Wicker, must be acknowledged. Their visibility is now being recognized with this plaque for all those to see and to know that LGBT history is American history, whether in New York State or Florida or Texas or elsewhere. This is especially important as we acknowledge the pushback of LGBTQ rights and increased violence against the community. Making this history public and accessible is critical to understanding our past and the importance of activism. While we are placing a tangible plaque on this building, we're helping with the intangible benefits of pride and identity, reducing isolation and shame of current and future generations of LGBTQ individuals. As Dick Leitch said in 1966 about the SIP-in and the subsequent goals, quote, "This is the start of a massive campaign to see that our constitutional rights to assembly are freely met and to enjoy the same freedoms given to those who are heterosexual." So thank you, and let's continue the celebration and have LGBTQ history recognized as American history.
Thank you so much, Ken, and thank you to the NYC LGBT Historic Sites Project for all of the great work that you do. Our next speaker, I just want to briefly say, we do this plaque program. We've been doing it for years. You wouldn't think, but it's often actually very hard to get business or property owners to agree to do this. Unsurprisingly, Helen was not one of those. She jumped at the chance, and that's emblematic of who she is and how she runs this bar. It is completely invested in the community, in being a part of it, in contributing to it, in adding to it, and in celebrating its history, and we're all luckier for it. Helen Buford.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome to SIP-in Day at Julius. I am extremely grateful to Ken Lustbader from NYC LGBT Historic Sites Project and for Village Preservation, Andrew Bergman. Thank you very much. Randy, thank you for being here. And I just wanted to say that to me, this bar is my home away from home. I'm so happy that we survived the pandemic. As Ken said, that was a touch and go. But with everyone's support and emails and financial support, the Gill Foundation, everyone who just saw the importance of that. I also have to say a thank you to my first friend when I started to run this bar on my own 13 years ago, my friend Tom Bernardin, who was a longtime customer, who sat down with me and explained to me the history of this bar and why it was so important to this community. And on that day, my promise to him was that as long as I ran this bar, that I will always be a friend to the LGBT community. So, the one thing that I have learned is that community and helping one another is one of the most important things. We are all beautiful humans. We all are Americans who deserve to be recognized. Our history has to be recognized by all. And that it is your constitutional right to request that, demand it, because it doesn't matter who you are. That is your right. And you should be treated fairly and equally, just like everyone else. So I say gay, 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 and I don't really care what Florida thinks for that matter. So, but I just wanted to say thank you and to invite you all later. We're celebrating with our Mattachine party that we do monthly, and to wish John Cameron Mitchell a very happy birthday. It's so fitting. It's so fitting that his birthday would be today. So thank you very much. And we welcome you all to come in later after the celebration.
Thank you so much, Helen, and let's keep supporting businesses like Julius's, because we want them to live on forever. So our next speaker, as mentioned before, has a very special relationship to Julius's and is not only able to add some substance to today's proceedings, but a little bit of style and panache as well. So I would like to invite John Cameron Mitchell to come up to the microphone.
Thanks, guys. I was born 3 years to the day before the sip-in happened here. And when I walked in here for the first time, I think it was, I'd always lived in the area, and it was, you know, in the 80s and 90s, it was a little sketchy and kind of exciting. I loved it. You know, the workers, you know, the boy workers were working. And eventually the workers became the same age as their customers, which is eventually what happens in all jobs. So it was always my neighborhood bar, and then, of course, with Giuliani and Bloomberg, things changed a lot, and it was under threat. You know, our friends were like, we can't, you know, this place is not going to become a Starbucks. You know, what can we do? So my friends and I, stars of the film Short Bus, started a dance party here 15 years ago. We've been doing, except for COVID, every month. We're doing one tonight. Come on by. It's pretty much after 9:30. And it's my birthday party. And we wanted to have a party that was welcoming to the older folks, the younger folks, you know, kind of keep it what it was, but bring in new blood. So we play all kinds of music, a lot of rock and roll, soul from the 60s, 70s, 80s. And it worked. You know, and then now there's other parties here after dark, which is an incredible party, and now it is thriving. It's doing well. It survived COVID. We did what we could to raise money. It survived. So I'm so happy to be here to see Randy, who I actually played in a recreation of the sip-in photo with the DJs of our party, which is somewhere back there. And Tom, of course, who's always been supportive of this place. And I remember the first time I really walked in and looked around, there was a headshot of a very obscure actor named Val Avery, who was in Cassavetes films, which I worshipped. And I was like, I'm home. You know, I'm really home. And now there's a picture of us on the wall too. So here's to Julius now and forever.
Thank you so much for that, John. And as I mentioned before, we are also joined by State Senator Brad Hoylman, who represents this area and who, if I remember correctly, was at the State National Register unveiling 6 years ago, and now has something else to unveil in relation to Julius's. State Senator.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Wow, I have a scratchy throat from 3 rallies today, so I apologize for that. But it's so great to be here, see so many friends. Thank you, Andrew, and the efforts, Ken, are so important for queer placemaking. You know, I see this as kind of a collective FU to Florida and Texas as we stand here. Because we are not going to let queer history be erased. And that's in part because we have such amazing advocates for my kids and our children's children and beyond. And we have this wonderful small business corridor, which is really incredible. 3 Lives & Co. right across the street, which has been renovated and rebuilt for future generations. So I'm very happy to acknowledge that. But I'm here because I was able to nominate Julius's for a place in the New York State Historic Business Preservation Registry. And Governor Hochul has established a small business registry to acknowledge the fact that small businesses are more than just places that make money and serve drinks. They are part of our communities all across New York. So without further ado, Helen, and thank you for your stewardship of this amazing location. What's that expression? You don't own it. You just safeguard it for future generations. And so I'm very honored to present this certificate to Julius's Bar, designating them a historic business in the state of New York, and to acknowledge that it has been added to the Historic Business Preservation Registry by the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation for the state of New York. And Randy, this is for you too. I'm sure Randy never thought he'd be added to a Historic Preservation Registry, but apparently you are.
He's a gay saint.
All right, so that was sort of the opening act, and now the main show is we are going to unveil the plaque, which will hopefully be here forever. So I'm going to ask Ken and Helen and Randy and Brad, you're welcome to join us over here. Probably going to need a little bit of help because it's quite secure here. Let's all start. You do it. You were here when you made this. So start pulling away. There we go. On April 21st, 1966, members of the Mattachine Society, a pioneering gay rights organization, challenged a regulation that prohibited bars from serving LGBT people by staging a sip-in at Julius's, a bar with a large gay clientele. With reporters and a photographer in tow, the activists announced that they were homosexuals, asked to be served, and were refused. This early gay rights action and the attendant publicity helped to raise awareness of widespread anti-LGBT discrimination and harassment. And it also notes that Julius's was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2016, placed by the NYC LGBT Historic Sites Project and Village Preservation. In addition to the incredibly important honoring the memory of what happened here, the folks who did it, supporting small businesses that serve our neighborhoods in so many ways and continue that wonderful history. I'm also going to just put in a little plug. If you like what groups like Village Preservation do or what NYC LGBT Historic Sites Project does, we're nonprofits, we depend on you. Feel free to get involved, join, contribute, help us do what we do. We need you to keep doing things like this all across this neighborhood and this city. Hopefully this will be one of many, many more that we can do. Thank you very much.
Bring Randy up. Let's hear from Randy. Witness, participant in history.
Well, I must say, it's sort of amazing to be here today. I mean, in 1966, you see the way I'm dressed. Today is the first day that I've dressed this way in several decades. But to be taken seriously when you're discussing serious issues, in 1966, you had to wear a black suit and a tie and look totally respectable. Of course, I couldn't have a Goodwin Marsha B. Johnson pin on in those days, and I hadn't even met her yet. But when I think back to how important it was, everyone lives this dream or this idea that everything started with Stonewall. Well, I started in 1958. That was 11 years before Stonewall. And it was the Mattachine Society and my group, the Homosexual League of New York, that were the first people to go on radio, to go on live television taking questions, to publicly demonstrate for the right to serve in the military down at the Army Induction Center. And one of the things that we did, that's a real legal imprint, was that Mattachine we came here and said, we have the right we want to be served. And they refused us. Now, we had gone to Howard Johnson's, we had gone to the TikTok bar, we had gone to a couple other places and went in and said, we're homosexuals and we want to be served a cocktail. And they all just laughed and said, oh, no problem. You know, they were not under the gun the way the people that ran Julius's was, because they had trapped somebody here and they were laying a network where they'd have to pay off the police and grease the machines that were the corrupt system that ran New York City bars, especially New York City gay bars. So actually, when we took this action, we were legally challenging the state laws that said it was illegal to serve homosexuals alcohol or to allow them to gather on your premises. That's a right of assembly. And by taking that legal action and setting that house of cards in order, we cracked the chain that held the village and held the gay community in this country locked in the hands of the criminal underground, the criminal gangs, all which owned every gay bar. There were no legitimately owned gay bars. We could not go, when I went into a bar and started giving out Mattachine literature, they said, get him out of here. No one was interested in the Mattachine literature in those days until they said, get him out of here. Then everybody wanted a leaflet. But most people in those days thought it was better, as long as people think we're all some sort of crazy, wild-looking people that they saw pictured in magazines, or, you know, then they won't realize that normal-looking people like us are actually gay. And they won't, so in a way there was a reluctance to be identified. They would say, oh, I don't want to be associated with that masculine woman or that drag queen or that person or this person. Maybe they were just snooty, didn't want to be associated with poor people either, you know, Puerto Ricans or Latinos or African Americans. So anyway, Julius's will always be special in my mind because it was the one point in all the early struggles that I was actually able to make a footprint in history. And
thank you, Randy.
Well, thank you, Andy Hahn. Andy Hahn has done great coverage of this whole city and the history. He has a regular show, Free Speech Television on YouTube, that really gives you all the news from across the nation. So there are two reasons that Julius's are my favorite bar. First of all, it's because it was the place where we started the ball rolling to liberate our society from the mob. The second is a little bit more personal, and I hope you don't think it's a little bit too flamboyant, but I particularly love Julius's because it was only by Julius's that I got my picture 2 times on the obituary page of the New York Times, and I'm still here at 84 years old to tell you about it and to hold this up and say I'm still here and I'm still fighting. I'm the last Mattachino, and I'm going to stay active as long as I can. Thank you all.
We love you, Randy. We love you, Randy.